So we're here in SmartCAD, uh, and because your next project is going to be a translation from English to Polish uh, done in SmartCAD, so a proper text, not this sample document, a proper document like a Word or a LibreOffice document, a formatted document, uh, uploaded here, processed, translated, and of course downloaded as the target document uh, and also the bilingual document. So, uh, so this is of course the main view. We are in My Tasks here, right? And of course we can create new projects. We can view our project. We can open our documents and so on, right? So of course a project can have a few documents. Um, so I'll go back to this main view, and I will talk about translation memories and glossaries. So we've talked about both of these things. You've created glossaries in a spreadsheet. So that was the last assignment that I'm going to correct soon. And we've talked about translation memories, right? What a translation memory is, how it works, and of course, when you translated this sample document, this tutorial document, a translation memory was automatically created, and it provided some suggestions while you were translating the document. So, so translation memories are situated here, right? So in this panel, you can see that you've got My Linguistic Assets, right? So you've got glossaries, which we'll talk about in a moment. You've got translation memories, and you've got global search. So we'll start with translation memories here. And you can see that I've already got some translation memories. And these are just translation memories that were automatically created while translating some texts, right? So of course you've got the translation memory name, you've got the languages used, so you can see that it's mostly English to Polish, although there are two translations from Polish to British English. You have the date, and you can also sort the list by date, and that way we can see the last translation memory created is the one created for this sample document, this tutorial document, which was started on the 1st of April. This is unfortunately the American date format, starting with the month. Yes, so this is the last created translation memory. It's automatically created. You cannot really edit the contents of this, right? So when you click on this, you've got the options, and you can click edit, but that doesn't really allow you to edit the content. It's just the settings, right? Like the name, the source language, the target language or languages, the subject, right? So you can organize your translation memories by subject as well. The clients, so if you have a few clients you're working for, you can assign those translation memories to them. You can have some comments, right? So this is just editing the settings here, basically. You can also delete it, right? You can export it, right? Which means you can use it in another application, or perhaps the same application on a different account later. right? So basically, it's a format which can be used in different applications, and we've mentioned that format, which is the TMX. And if you use the default settings, it will export using that format. If you select export mode here, so if you try to change the export mode, you can see that this is the default, right? It's the TMX format with some versions, which I know nothing about, but you can also export as an Excel file. However, it actually exports as an XML file, so I'm not sure about how you would use it, and I don't think you really need to do that. You might experiment with exporting and importing an Excel file while using glossaries, because there you can actually do it, and you could actually use glossaries created in a spreadsheet, the way we did it, to import a glossary here and also to export it. However, you would need to modify it a bit, which we'll talk about later when we talk about glossaries. So back to translation memories. We've got all these translation memories, which are created automatically, as I said. And they contain all the data, all the segments or sentences translated from one language to another. And whenever the same or similar text is found in the original as one translated before, of course you will get those suggestions. Right, so that's how you manage them, basically, right? You can delete them, you can export them. Updating basically means that you import a file. So it's like importing, right? You can actually use the Excel format, but we're not going to go into that. Overwriting, so it's the same thing, but it will just overwrite it. It will not add items to it, right? So you won't need to use this very often, I suppose. Okay, so this works more or less automatically. Deleting these memories, or the ability to delete them, is important because if you have some previous translations and you would like to use those translations memories, you can of course attach them to your new translation, right? Or even in the same translation, of course it's used automatically, but you might decide that maybe those translations are not satisfactory, right? So you're no longer satisfied with those translations, but they are still inserted or they are still suggested. So if you want to start anew, then you would just delete it, right? Basically. Okay, so and then of course it will be created from the start with the new data. Right, so just to demonstrate, of course, I don't need all these translations, so I might decide to delete them. You will, of course, get a warning, confirm, and that goes away. Okay, so let's move on to glossaries. So glossaries, here you create them manually. We worked on glossaries in a spreadsheet, right? That was your assignment, that was your project. But here you can also create a glossary by clicking on this button. Of course, you give it a name. So, for example, if you want a glossary for car parts, you might call it car parts. You select the languages, right? And you can also add another language, right? So of course, you can have multiple languages because we're talking about terms. And you could even have separate columns or separate entries for British and American English, right? So instead of English in general here, you might select United Kingdom, for example. Then you would select American English, so you would go to English USA, and finally you would have Polish or Ukrainian, maybe even, right? And you can add some comments. You've got some advanced settings which are about, so you would need to modify them if you needed a different kind of layout, right? So we're not going into this now because it's a little too involved. And it's mainly about importing and exporting glossaries. So you can see you've got this glossary created with these entries. So you have the British English column, you have the American column, you have the Polish term, you have some comments, right? And also some information about who it's modified by, if there are a few users, and when it's modified, or when it was modified, basically, right? So you can just add a new entry, right? So you can say, for example, bonnet, right? And the American term is hood, and the Polish term is maska, right? And you can add some comments if you want. So of course you confirm with this tick here on the right, and it's being saved, right? So you have this term already, and you can add more terms. So let me add one or two more. So add, let's add, for example, boot, trunk. Okay, so we don't need to do that. I don't know why that happened. Let me just, maybe you can have multiple translations. So let me just confirm that. Okay, and maybe something that has the same term in British and American English, like for example, steering wheel, right? So probably you would want to type it again rather than leave it out. And then, of course, the Polish translation, Kierownica. Okay, and you can add a comment, often just wheel, right? As in behind the wheel, right? So we don't always use this whole phrase in English. Okay, so we have three terms. So of course we can select to use this glossary in our translation, right? But before we do that, let's try to download it. Okay. And you can see that it's actually exported as an XLSX file, which is Excel file, Excel spreadsheet, right? So I can open this, and actually this is not the right application because it has problems with Excel files. So I'm going to go to my folder here, and I'm going to open it with, so this is a Linux system, so I don't have Microsoft Office, but I have compatible applications. So I've got WPS spreadsheets, which is an Office suite compatible with Microsoft Office. I can also use LibreOffice, which is also quite compatible. So you can see that it works, right? But because this WPS Office looks a little more like Microsoft Office, I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like here, right? So you can see, well, this order is slightly strange. So we would have to perhaps work with the settings because it starts with the comments here, right? So I'll try to make it larger so that you can see better. Right, so you've got the creation time. So it's basically, it looks like reversed order. Not quite, because here it starts with the British terms. So here the order seems to be correct from the left to the right. Right, you've got so this is the heading. You've got the British term, the American term, and the Polish translation. But those other fields are here. So you would either have to change or work with the settings in SmartCat, or if you create a glossary. So you can imagine now, since you've exported this, you know what this looks like, right, inside of SmartCat. So now you can imagine creating your own glossary in a spreadsheet like we did before. Only you would just use the same kind of layout, right? So you would have the same type of columns as here. So you can imagine just starting a new glossary and deleting, just removing. You can actually leave the author, but you can imagine deleting most of this, right, with the delete button, and you can delete the terms, right? And basically you can start a new glossary, which you would then import into SmartCat. So working like this might be more convenient than working with this, than working inside SmartCat. It depends on the situation, I guess. But I think this might be a little faster because it's a desktop application. And even if, say, you've got problems with the internet, right? Because with SmartCat you need a connection. Here you might just edit your glossary and or create the whole glossary first and then just import it, or just add some terms to the glossary, and then while importing you would select the option to so where are we? You would select the option to add rather than overwrite. So if you say upload here, right, you can see that you have this option here, right? This is selected by default, right? Add terms. So the terms will be added rather than replacing the existing items, right? So so that's what you can do using a spreadsheet. Okay, so these are the two important features, right, of basically any CAT software, right? You've got translation memories, you've got glossaries. Here you also have this function global search, where you can just look inside. So you can look for translations of words, phrases, maybe even sentences inside of those resources, inside of your translation memory. So I might say, okay, let's have hood. We'll see if that works. No matches found. Right, I'm not sure why. We've got the car parts. We've got the hood here. All right. Terminology, global concordance. Okay, so it seems that it actually uses. So basically, you'd have to experiment. I haven't used this before, to be honest. It seems it just searches in databases for translations. I think previously when I tried it, it actually did provide some translations for me from. Anyway, that's not so important because normally you wouldn't actually. I mean, if you were to look for terms, you would just use some online sources, right? And if you actually want to use these translation memories, you would use them inside the document while translating it, right? So I'm not really sure how useful this is. Okay, so I'll go back to the text that we worked with, and I'm going to. Okay, so when you actually go to the project, so you can see, you can of course open the individual files here from this view, but to change or add some assets to use with the translation, to use with the project, you have to click Go to Project here, right? So this is the project panel, and you can see at the top you have these tabs basically. So you've got the files, you've got statistics of your document, and you have linguistic assets. So that's what we're interested in, right? And you can see that actually here you've got the translation memories listed, where you can, as a matter of fact, add another translation memory or create a new one, right? So you might create a new translation memory that will collect your data, collect your translations from now on, where again you can select the subject, you can select the source and target language. So let's just call it TM2 for testing purposes, and it's here, right? And you can also select machine translation, which means a service such as Google Translate or DeepL or another one. So you can click that, but usually the functionality is limited, right? So if you would like a full-featured or fully featured machine translation service that would help you with the translation, would give you suggestions from, for example, Google Translate, you would probably have to buy it, right? Buy the service, pay for it. So we'll look at machine translation later on in the course. So I'm not going to talk about it now. Okay, so I'm going to untick this, but below you can see the glossaries, right? And you can see that I have these glossaries which I created, right? So I can just select it, for example, car parts, if that's relevant, and save, right? And this is selected as a translation memory. So if I now go to the actual document or documents, because these are all documents which are part of this project. Right, so this is what we translated, and let's say that I Well, of course, the problem is that I have no control over this source text. But if there was a term that was found in a glossary, it would be suggested, right? Okay, so by the way, if you want to learn more about SmartCat, I've provided this link here, which gives you an overview of all the features, right? And it's pretty straightforward. These are relatively simple explanations of all the features, all the steps for each task. So yes, you've got this getting started section, which consists of these small sections or chapters, right? So creating a new project, assigning tasks, translating a document, and on the left you can see those main sections that you saw on the main page there, right? So they are listed on the left, so you can just navigate using them. Right, you can see there is a chapter or section on translation memories, so you can look at all these individual articles, right? And you've got some screenshots. These are pretty short, as you can see, pretty short explanations. So if you need some help, you can always go here and try to look for help. Right, so just to demonstrate the process of starting a new project, I'm going to upload a document, and the important thing is that it also has quite a bit of formatting. So we'll also talk a little bit about those tags that you used in the sample project, because if you remember, there was this word abracadabra, which I, by the way, misspelled, because in Polish, of course, it's spelled with a K, but certain words were marked with those tags, but the original document wasn't there wasn't too much formatting, maybe except that 1 or 2 words, and actually it was divided into separate sentences already. So let's see how SmartCat will cope with an actual document that we will present it with. And actually I already uploaded it here, so I'm going to delete it because I don't want to. I want to start from the beginning. So I'm going to go back to tasks here. Right, so to actually delete the document, I have to go to the project again, to this project page, and then I select it, and here I've got this rubbish bin icon, and I can delete it. Right, so now we only have one document here. So I'm going to upload another document, and this document is actually a document with my requirements for classes. Right, so you can see that it's a document that has some formatting here. Right, so it's got some colors, it's got some underlines, it's got some bold text, right? And I think most of it is manual. And actually this text is a different size as well, so that's quite a mess actually. But we'll see how this application copes with this document, right? So I'm going to just drag it here, right? Okay, and so we're translating from English to Polish because most of the document is in English. Right. So of course progress 0 because we haven't translated anything. And so if I open it, you will see that, of course, the text is divided into these segments, which are basically sentences, right? And you can see these tags, right? You can see these tags everywhere, which would correspond to different kinds of formatting. So, of course, the goal is the purpose of these tags is so that you can mark the corresponding words and phrases in the translated document, so that the formatting is preserved, basically, right? So I'm going to look at that document. So let me just open it again. Right, and I'm going to start translating, right? So if we look at that, you can see that this is marked here with this tag, the first one, number 1, right? So in each, they are numbered in each segment, right? So if there is more formatting, more added formatting in a given segment, it will number these formatted parts. So if I say, for example, obecność obowiązkowa, right, and I confirm this, okay, there's an error, right? So of course we are warned about this these tags, right? So they are missing from this translation, and it needs to know which word it is actually that it needs to format in the same way. Here it might seem pretty obvious, but if you have a sentence where you've got, a different word order and different number of words in the original from the translation, so of course you need to tell the application which word should have the same formatting. So which word is actually the same word in the original, right? So right, so Alt-1, that was the shortcut, right? Right, and we might perhaps try this one. So there is some Polish text actually, but it doesn't really matter. Let's take something else, maybe. Wszystkie oceny i punkty, punktacja. Oparte są na procentach. Na procentach, a odpowiadające im oceny. I don't know if that's very coherent in Polish, but let's not worry about the content so much, because we want to focus on these tags. So odpowiadające im oceny są określone. Not happy with this, but są sprecyzowane. again, don't pay attention to this translation. Let's right. So grades and scoring. So we have to indicate this is the same formatting. Okay. And percentages, right? Percentages are highlighted, so we have to insert the second. So Alt 2, right? And then we confirm. Okay. So that's done. Okay, so this is another problem. Tag 1 is missing in target. What do you mean? It's not missing. So, okay, I forgot to confirm it. Right, so now when I download it, so of course this is not complete, but I'm going to see what these two sections look like. So I'm going to try to download just the target here. So just the translation, okay? Right. So you can see what happens when you don't translate, when you haven't translated the whole document, right? It just replaces those parts which have been translated with the translation, and it leaves the original in the same place. But we can see that this formatting is preserved right here, and the same situation here, right? Okay, so basically that's all I wanted to talk about. So I talked about using translation memories, managing them, deleting them, and so on. I've talked about glossaries, creating a new glossary, managing the glossary, adding it to your document, to your project actually, right? And finally, I've mentioned these formatting tags, right? So I think you're more or less ready to undertake your first project, which I will notify you about. So I'll create an assignment, I'll provide a detailed explanation and also text sources.